All right, ready to dive into something pretty deep today.
Always up for a deep dive, especially when it comes to philosophy. What do we have on the docket?
Let's tackle Lawrence Kohlberg's Essays on Moral Development, Volume 1. I think with your philosophical leanings, this deep dive should really pique your interest.
Oh, absolutely. Kohlberg is a fascinating figure. He sits right at the intersection of psychology, philosophy, and education.
Exactly. And this book, a collection of his essays, offers such a multifaceted look at his theories.
Multifaceted is right. He dives into so many different nuances.
Yeah, and for this deep dive, we're going to try to sift through some of those complex ideas and really try to extract those core insights about, how people develop a sense of morality.
I'm game. Where do we even begin with a thinker like Kohlberg?
I think a great starting point would be that central problem he addresses the dilemma of teaching morality.
Right. How do you teach about morality, or even just right and wrong, without just imposing your own values? It's tricky.
Yeah, it's a challenge I've always wrestled with, especially when it comes to education.
Absolutely. It's something every educator grapples with at some point. Kohlberg actually argues pretty strongly against what he calls the bag of virtues approach.
The bag of virtues approach?
Yeah, just trying to instill a predetermined set of virtues just doesn't work, he says.
I can see why. Who gets to decide which virtues make it into the bag? It seems pretty subjective.
Exactly. And that's Kohlberg's critique. He argues instead for stimulating moral development through dialogue.
That sounds interesting. It's almost like a Socratic approach.
Yeah, he draws a parallel to how Socrates challenged people's thinking, guided them toward discovering their own moral principles.
I see. So it's less about dictating a specific code of conduct and more about nurturing that ability to think critically about moral issues.
Precisely. For Kohlberg, the true content of moral education is justice, which aligns, by the way, with those fundamental values enshrined in, the U.S. Bill of Rights.
Interesting how he ties that in. Now, this brings us to his famous stages of moral development.
Ah, yes, the 6 stages. Such a cornerstone of his work.
They really are. And it's not just like steps on a ladder. They represent these fundamentally different ways of reasoning about what's right and wrong.
Right. They're qualitatively different, yeah.
So let's break them down a bit. Stage 1. What's going on there?
Stage 1 is all about obedience and avoid punishment. Think of a young child who believes something's wrong simply because they'll get in trouble for it.
Right. Very basic understanding, driven purely by consequences.
Exactly.
Okay, so how do things shift as we move to stage 2?
Well, in stage 2, that focus shifts to self-interest.
That what's in it for me kind of thinking.
Precisely. Right and wrong are determined by personal gain. What do I get out of it?
I could definitely see those first 2 stages playing out in, well, not just children, but even adults sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. And, Kohlberg argued that most people actually operate within the first 4 stages for much of their lives.
Really? So what about those next 2 stages, stages 3 and 4?
So stage 3 marks the entry into what he calls the conventional level.
Conventional meaning.
Meaning it's about conforming to social norms and expectations. So in stage 3, good behavior is all about pleasing others, seeking that social approval.
So the focus expands beyond just personal gain. It's about fitting in and meeting those social expectations.
Exactly. Then in stage 4, that perspective broadens even further.
In what way?
It expands to a wider, more societal perspective. Upholding the law, maintaining social order, doing your duty, these all become really important.
So it's about recognizing the importance of rules and laws for the smooth functioning of society.
Right. And respecting authority plays a big role in this stage as well.
So you said earlier that most people kind of operate within these first 4 stages.
That's what Kohlberg found, yes. But he proposed that some individuals progress even further. They reach what he calls the post-conventional or principled level.
And those are the final 2 stages.
Exactly, stages 5 and 6.
Now this is where it gets really interesting, especially for a philosopher. What distinguishes these more advanced stages?
Well, in stage 5, individuals start to understand morality more in terms of the social contract and individual rights.
Okay, so less about blind obedience to rules and more about recognizing that laws should serve the greater good.
Precisely. They might even argue that laws need to be changed if they're not serving that purpose. They're not just accepting the status quo.
That definitely resonates with a lot of ideas we grapple with in political philosophy.
Absolutely. And then there's stage 6. This represents, in Kohlberg's framework, the pinnacle of moral development. It's where judgments are guided by these universal ethical principles.
It sounds very Kantian, almost like a real-world embodiment of the categorical imperative.
You're spot on. Kohlberg actually saw a lot of parallels between his work and philosophical ideas like Kant's categorical imperative and even Rawls' theory of justice.
Wow, so he's really connecting these abstract philosophical concepts with the way people develop morally in the real world.
Yes, he's bridging that gap.
This is so much richer than just reading about ethical theories in a textbook. It's like seeing them come to life.
I agree. It adds a whole new layer of complexity and nuance.
Now, I'm curious, does Kohlberg give any specific examples that illustrate these stages? Like, how do these different levels of moral reasoning actually manifest in real-life situations?
He does. He uses a bunch of different examples, but one of his most famous is the Heinz dilemma.
The Heinz dilemma.
Yeah, it involves this man, Heinz, whose wife is dying. She needs this life-saving medication, but he can't afford it, so he considers stealing it.
Oh, that's a tough one. A classic moral dilemma.
Exactly. And it's fascinating to see how people at different stages would approach this situation.
So walk me through it. How would someone at, say, stage 1 respond?
Someone at stage one, focused on obedience and punishment, might say that Heinz shouldn't steal the drug simply because it's against the law. He'd get in trouble.
Makes sense. And how about stage 2?
Someone at stage two, driven by self-interest, might say Heinz should steal it. He needs his wife to survive, to help him.
Both perspectives are so focused on those immediate consequences. It's interesting to contrast that with how someone at, say, stage 5 might reason about it.
Right. At stage five, someone might argue that while stealing is generally wrong, Heinz's situation is exceptional. Their right to life, outweighs the right to property.
They're appealing to a higher moral principle, not just a rule.
Exactly. And that's the key difference between those lower and higher stages. It's not just about the answer, but the reasoning behind it.
It's fascinating how those examples bring the stages to life and show how our moral reasoning can evolve over time. What's even more interesting is that Kohlberg found evidence for this stage theory across different cultures, right?
That's right. He studied children and adults in various countries and found that they progress through those stages in the same order, suggesting that there might be something universal about the way humans grapple with moral issues.
It's like there's a common thread in our moral development, regardless of where we come from.
Precisely.
This is making me think, if these stages are truly universal, does that imply that certain ethical principles are, I don't know, more natural or more rational than others?
Now, that's a really interesting question, one that philosophers have been debating for centuries.
And it seems like Kohlberg's work adds a whole new dimension to that debate. It's not just about abstract theorizing anymore, but about understanding how those theories might play out in the way people actually develop morally.
He's connecting the dots between those abstract philosophical ideas and the concrete reality of human experience.
I love that. It makes me want to re-examine all those ethical frameworks we've studied through the lens of Kohlberg's stages.
It's definitely a powerful new lens.
Now, before we get too lost in that philosophical rabbit hole, I want to shift gears a bit and explore the psychological underpinnings of Kohlberg's theory. He talks about this cognitive developmental perspective, which seems crucial to understanding how these stages actually unfold.
Right, so we're moving from the philosophical to the psychological.
In a way, yes. So what is this cognitive developmental perspective all about?
Well, Kohlberg argues that moral reasoning isn't just about passively absorbing rules from external sources. It's about actively constructing our understanding of morality through our interactions with the world.
So it's not like we're downloading a moral code, but rather actively engaging with the world and building our understanding through those experiences.
Exactly, and he draws heavily on the work of Piaget here.
Piaget, the developmental psychologist.
Yes, Kohlberg argues that just like we go through stages of cognitive development, we also go through stages of moral development. They develop in tandem.
That's a fascinating connection. It makes me think, how does Kohlberg address the issue of the naturalistic fallacy?
Ah, you're sharp. That's an important point.
Just because something is a certain way, it doesn't automatically mean it ought to be that way.
Precisely. And Kohlberg was very careful to distinguish between descriptive and prescriptive claims. He was meticulous in avoiding equating what is with what should be.
So he's providing this roadmap of moral development without actually dictating the destination.
That's a great way to put it.
This brings us to a point that I think you'll find especially intriguing, the possibility of a seventh stage, something that transcends even a principled sense of justice.
A seventh stage. That's interesting. What did Kohlberg have in mind?
It's almost like he's pointing towards a realm of spiritual unity and acceptance, something that goes beyond our traditional notions of right and wrong.
And this is where he draws parallels to advanced stages of religious thinking, even referencing Fowler's stages of faith development as a framework.
It sounds like he's pushing the boundaries of what we typically think of as moral development.
He is, and he uses figures like Marcus Aurelius and Andreas Simpson as examples of individuals who might embody this kind of advanced moral perspective.
I'm really curious about those examples. Why those figures specifically?
Well, Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, exemplified a life guided by duty and a deep understanding of the interconnectedness of all things.
That definitely aligns with Stoic philosophy.
And Andrea Simpson, a Quaker and social activist, dedicated her life to serving others, especially those who are marginalized and suffering.
So they both represent a kind of moral commitment that goes beyond a strict sense of rules or justice.
Yes. Their actions were driven by a deeper sense of compassion, unity, and perhaps even a sense of transcendence.
It definitely challenges our assumptions about the limits of moral development.
It does. Kohlberg even explores the role of tragedy in deepening moral understanding. He references stories like Antigone and the Book of Job.
Bringing in literature, I love that.
It's like those narratives, those explorations of suffering and loss, can force us to confront moral dilemmas in a way that logic alone can't resolve.
It's a reminder that our moral lives are shaped by so much more than just our cognitive processes. Our experiences, our emotions, the stories we encounter, they all play a part.
And that's what makes this whole exploration of moral development so fascinating. It's this intricate tapestry woven from all these different threads.
This has been such a whirlwind tour of Kohlberg's ideas so far, from the stages of moral development to the connections to philosophy and psychology, and now even hinting at a stage beyond justice.
I know. It's incredible how he manages to weave it all together.
We've covered a lot of ground, but there's still so much more to unpack. So for our listeners who are eager to delve deeper into these fascinating ideas, I highly recommend picking up a copy of Essays on Moral Development, Volume 1, and diving in.
You won't regret it. It really is a fascinating read, and there's so much more to Kohlberg's work than just those 6 stages.
Right, like we were just talking about, he uses these really compelling examples to illustrate how those stages actually play out in real-life situations.
Exactly. He doesn't just present these abstract ideas, he grounds them in these concrete dilemmas that really make you think.
And you know what's really fascinating? It's how those examples, like the Heinz dilemma, resonate with people across different cultures and time periods.
It's true, they tap into these fundamental questions about morality that seem to transcend any specific cultural context. It's like we're all grappling with these same basic dilemmas regardless of where we come from or when we live.
It makes me think about the power of storytelling. Like Kohlberg's examples are essentially mini-stories, these narratives that capture these moral conflicts in a way that really engages us.
You're right, and stories have always been a powerful way to explore moral questions and transmit values. Think about all those great works of literature that grapple with themes of justice, fairness, and the complexities of human relationships.
It's like those stories are providing us with a kind of moral education, helping us to see different perspectives and refine our own sense of ethics.
I think that's a great point, and it's something we can all benefit from regardless of our age or where we are on that moral development journey. We're constantly learning and growing and refining our understanding of what it means to be moral.
It makes me think about something you mentioned earlier, that idea of a possible seventh stage, one that goes beyond a principled sense of justice. He used figures like Marcus Aurelius and Andreas Simpson as examples. As a philosopher, what are your thoughts on this idea of a seventh stage and how those figures fit in?
It's definitely one of the more thought-provoking aspects of his work. He suggests that there might be a stage that transcends justice, a realm where things like spiritual unity and acceptance become more central, and he draws parallels to advanced stages of religious thinking, using Fowler's stages of faith development as a framework, and figures like Marcus Aurelius and Andreas Simpson seem to embody this idea.
I'm struggling a bit with how to conceptualize this seventh stage. It feels a bit abstract, almost mystical. What kind of evidence does Kohlberg present to support this idea?
It's true, this 7th stage is more speculative than the others. Kohlberg acknowledges this and doesn't present it as a definitive stage in the same way as the first 6, but he sees hints of it in certain individuals and philosophical traditions.
So more of a potential direction for moral development rather than a clearly defined stage.
Exactly. He sees it as a possible evolution of moral thinking, moving beyond the strict application of rules and principles towards a more holistic understanding of interconnectedness and compassion.
That makes sense. It's pushing the boundaries of those traditional ethical frameworks and asking us to consider what might lie beyond.
And the figures he uses to illustrate this, Marcus Aurelius and Andreas Simpson, are fascinating examples of individuals who seem to operate from a different moral compass.
Earlier, you mentioned how Marcus Aurelius, with his Stoic philosophy, exemplified a life guided by duty and an understanding of interconnectedness. Could you elaborate on why Kohlberg saw him as potentially embodying this seventh stage?
Well, you see, Aurelius, as both Roman emperor and philosopher, lived by a code that went beyond mere calculations of rights and duties. His writings, if you really delve into them, reveal this focus on a kind of cosmic justice, an acceptance of fate, and a deep awareness of the interconnectedness of all things.
Those are certainly themes that resonate with Stoicism. And what about Andreas Simpson? What aspects of her life led Kohlberg to include her as an example?
Simpson, a Quaker and social activist, dedicated her life to service, particularly for the marginalized and those suffering. Her actions weren't driven by the sense of obligation or a strict moral code, but rather, it seems, by this profound compassion and an unwavering belief in the inherent worth of every human being.
It's as if their motivations transcend those clearly defined stages of moral reasoning.
That's the key point. Kohlberg saw in them a glimpse of a morality that moves beyond the purely rational, incorporating elements of spirituality, interconnectedness, and perhaps even a sense of transcendence.
It definitely challenges our assumptions about the limits of moral development. It's like he's suggesting there might be a whole other dimension to morality that we haven't fully explored yet.
This brings us back to that intriguing connection between moral development and storytelling. Kohlberg even delves into the role of tragedy in shaping our moral understanding, referencing stories like Antigone and the Book of Job. He suggests that encountering these narratives, these profound explorations of suffering and loss, can force us to confront complex moral dilemmas that go beyond what logic alone can solve.
It's fascinating how he weaves literature into his exploration of moral development. It seems to suggest that there are layers to our moral compass that go beyond purely intellectual reasoning.
Precisely. He's acknowledging that lived experience, particularly experiences of suffering and loss, can shape our moral sensibilities in profound ways, potentially even pushing us toward those higher levels of understanding.
This entire discussion makes me wonder, if these stages are truly universal, as Kohlberg's research suggests, does that imply that certain ethical principles are more natural or rational than others? What implications would that have for ethical theory?
That's a question that's been at the heart of philosophical debate for centuries. Are there inherent moral truths, or is morality purely a social construct? Kohlberg's work seems to offer a fresh perspective on this age-old dilemma.
It's not just about abstract theorizing anymore. It's about understanding how those theories might manifest in the way humans actually develop a moral compass.
Exactly. He's bridging the gap between those grand philosophical ideals and the lived reality of moral development.
I can already see connections to different ethical frameworks. We've discussed utilitarianism, deontology, virtue ethics. It's like seeing those frameworks come to life, not as static concepts in a textbook, but as dynamic processes unfolding within individuals.
And it makes you wonder, could those frameworks themselves evolve as our moral reasoning matures? Could there be an ethical system that aligns with those later stages, or even that potential seventh stage?
That's a really intriguing question. It makes me want to re-examine those ethical frameworks through the lens of Kohlberg's stages. It's like we're being challenged to expand our understanding of what's possible in the realm of ethics.
And that's the beauty of Kohlberg's work. It doesn't provide all the answers, but it opens up these new avenues of inquiry, new ways of thinking about those fundamental questions that have captivated philosophers for millennia.
This deep dive has been an incredible journey so far, but I feel like we've only just begun to unpack the richness of Kohlberg's ideas.
There's still so much to explore, but for now, let's shift our focus to a particularly fascinating aspect of his work. He delves into the moral atmosphere of institutions, exploring how the environments we inhabit can influence our moral development. I think you'll find this particularly interesting, given your philosophical background.
I'm all ears. It seems like a natural progression from focusing on individual development to understanding how societal structures play a role.
Exactly. Kohlberg argues that the environments we inhabit, especially institutions like schools, prisons, and even entire societies, have their own kind of moral climate that can either foster or hinder moral growth.
So it's not just about individuals developing morally, but about creating the kinds of environments that support and encourage that development.
Precisely. Kohlberg even outlines different types of moral climates, ranging from those that emphasize strict obedience and punishment to those that encourage dialogue, critical thinking, and a sense of shared responsibility.
I'm imagining that these different moral climates would correspond to different stages of moral development. For example, a school that relies heavily on rules and punishment might reflect a stage 1 or stage 2 level of moral reasoning, while a school that emphasizes student participation and ethical discussions would foster a more advanced level of moral development.
You're exactly right. Kohlberg argues that institutions often reflect the dominant stage of moral reasoning within a society. He conducted research on the effects of these different moral atmospheres and found that environments that promote dialogue, role-taking, and a sense of community tend to stimulate moral growth in individuals.
That's fascinating. It suggests we can intentionally design institutions in ways that encourage ethical behavior and a stronger sense of justice.
It's about creating spaces where individuals feel empowered to voice their opinions, consider different perspectives, and work together to resolve moral dilemmas.
This makes me think about the crucial role of democratic values in nurturing moral development. A society that embraces open dialogue, free expression, and participatory decision-making is more likely to cultivate individuals capable of principled moral reasoning.
Absolutely. It's about creating a culture that values both individual rights and our shared responsibility to build a more just and equitable world.
This all ties into the broader picture of social change. It's not just about individuals becoming more moral, it's about transforming institutions and creating a society that reflects those higher ethical principles.
It's about moving beyond a purely individualistic conception of morality and recognizing the interconnectedness of our actions and the moral climate we create together.
This is a powerful message, and it's so relevant to the challenges we face in the world today. We need leaders, educators, and citizens who can think critically, engage in respectful dialogue, and work collaboratively to address those complex moral issues.
And we need institutions that support and foster those values, creating environments where individuals can thrive and contribute to building a better world. It's really about creating a culture that fosters those values of critical thinking, empathy, and a commitment to justice.
You mentioned earlier that Kohlberg did some research on those different moral atmospheres. Can you tell me a bit more about those studies? What did he actually find?
Sure. One of the most interesting studies involved working within a prison system. It might sound a bit surprising, but he and his colleagues actually tried to create a just community within a prison setting.
A just community in a prison. That sounds almost paradoxical. How did that work in practice?
The goal was to see if they could shift the moral atmosphere of the prison, moving away from that traditional emphasis on obedience and punishment towards an environment that encouraged more moral reasoning and a sense of fairness.
That's a bold experiment. So how did they do that? What did it involve?
They experimented with giving the inmates more autonomy, encouraging them to participate in the decision-making process, and fostering a sense of shared responsibility for the community.
So trying to create a more democratic and participatory environment, even within the confines of a prison. Did it work? Did they see any changes in the inmates' moral reasoning?
The results were mixed, as you might expect. Changing the deeply ingrained culture of a prison is a huge challenge, but there were some really encouraging signs. Inmates who participated in this Just Community program did show some evidence of moral growth.
That's incredible. Even in an environment designed to restrict freedom, there's still potential for moral development.
Exactly, and that's one of the most hopeful takeaways from Kohlberg's work, I think. It suggests that no environment is inherently devoid of moral potential. It's about creating those conditions, fostering a moral atmosphere that allows for growth and reflection.
It's a reminder that we shouldn't give up on people, even those who have made mistakes and are serving time.
Absolutely.
This makes me think about the role of emotions in all of this. It feels like this is an area that Kohlberg doesn't explore as deeply as the cognitive side of moral development.
You're right. While Kohlberg acknowledges the role of emotions, his primary focus is on that evolution of moral reasoning. He's really analyzing how our thinking about right and wrong changes over time.
But it seems like our moral lives aren't just driven by logic and abstract principles, right? Our emotions, feelings like empathy, compassion, guilt, they all play a role.
Absolutely. Sometimes those emotions can be a powerful force for good, driving us to act compassionately, to fight for justice, to stand up for what we believe is right.
It's like those emotions can sometimes propel us towards those higher stages of moral development, even before our reasoning fully catches up.
Exactly. But we've also all experienced how emotions can sometimes lead us astray, cloud our judgment, or even lead us to make decisions we later regret.
Right? It's this constant dance between reason and emotion. We're all trying to find that balance.
And that's part of what makes moral development so complex and fascinating. It's not about reaching some final destination, some perfect state of moral enlightenment. It's this ongoing process of growth, reflection, and integration, continually striving to align our actions with our values, recognizing the interplay between our heads and our hearts.
And that striving, that willingness to keep learning and growing, is something we can all embrace, regardless of where we are on that journey.
Couldn't agree more.
This has been such a rich and thought-provoking exploration of Kohlberg's work. We've covered so much ground today.
We have. From those stages of moral development and their connection to different philosophical theories, to the role of institutions and the moral atmosphere they create, and even those hints of a stage beyond justice, it's been a fascinating journey.
It really has. And to you, our philosopher listener, we hope this deep dive has given you some new perspectives on the complexities of moral development.
Keep those philosophical wheels turning and keep striving to make the world a more just and compassionate place.
And until next time, happy pondering.